Hey, it's not every day you get to hang out with Rich Birch. Rich, it's good to have you with me today.
Hey, Tony, glad to be here. Thanks so much for your time.
And we're actually going to be talking about Rich's new book. See, I have it right here.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, I love the design, but it's called the Church Growth Flywheel. And Rich, this is an interesting book. In fact, I want to dive right in. You seem to be focusing 100% of the time, actually, in this book on encouraging people to invite others to
Mhm.
engage with the church, and don't spend a lot of time around the traditional marketing and advertising and promotion that I see a lot of churches doing. What's that all about?
Well, wow, you're cutting right to the chase here, Tony. This is great. And I love that. It's funny because I've been in talking to a number of people and no one has actually pointed that out yet. And so I appreciate that. I think it's a great question. I think when we look at the book was written out of my experience at Liquid Church, one of the fastest growing churches in the country. That was a great experience. And then also through 200 plus interviews with churches that are all kinds of churches that are growing quickly. And one of the things what I tried to do is boil down all the lessons from those churches. I'm trying to make it really easy. I talk about putting the cookies on the bottom shelf, trying to make it so it's really a starting point for churches. And one of the things I've noticed is most churches, we know that people come to our church because people invite their friends. But the churches that seem to prevail spend a lot of time, effort, and energy trying to encourage that actually they work to try to make their churches remarkable, literally, kind of borrowing from the Seth Godin thing. They actually want to make their churches the kind of places that people want to talk about, that they're kind of places that people want to, tell their friends about. And they don't actually spend a lot of time. In fact, we've seen lots of examples over the years. New Spring, which you were connected with years ago,
Mhm.
used to, do advertising on American Idol. Like they were like, let's pour money into that. And I have really shifted away from that over these last number of years and have focused much more on social content and how do we develop tools that people can, use to share. And we're seeing that across lots of different churches. So although I think external advertising and that has its place, I know, there's still people that talk about, hey, you should do a flyer drop and all those things. We don't talk about any of those things in this book at all. It's really about how do you get your people to talk to their friends and family about, coming and connecting with the church. Definitely.
And you have to have something that's invitable then, basically, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a mixture in the book between, the kind of how do we develop communication tools and that, but then actually ask some core questions around what is it that people are talking about. Actually, one of the kind of 5 systems we talk about that I'm seeing time and time again is this idea of mass mobilization, where churches are getting people out of their seats and into the streets, actually doing something to see their people serve in their community. And, I talk about Pull Apart Elevation Church, what they've done with Love Week, which is probably one of the most extreme examples. North Point, the church you're a part of, has done similar things for years where they try to take their people and say, let's actually go and do something in the community. Now, obviously, this is a great thing. And we talk about this in the book. It's lots of people in the community see this as a good thing. We believe it's a God thing. We believe actually serving the community is an important part of what we're supposed to do as a Christ follower. But from a church growth point of view, looking at it from that angle, that tactic of getting your people serving is really a remarkable thing for folks to be a part of. They want to tell their friends about it. You get everybody with the same t-shirt on, not to be too crass. You get everybody with the same t-shirt on, out rebuilding, and we saw this at our church, going, one weekend we ended a series on kind of biblical masculinity. And the punchline of the series was, let's try to get all the guys in our church, which we did in the end at that point, got probably 60-70% of our guys from our church to spend a weekend rebuilding a battered women's shelter.
Hmm.
And the idea was, let's try to use our strength for positive to help women who, a lot of them have been impacted with negative masculinity, where those men have used their strength for negative. And I could tell you, as a guy, that was one of those moments I was really proud to be a part of. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And you can believe I was sharing that with my friends. Not only was I inviting them to come be a part of that, but then we wanted to tell them, hey, this is the kind of thing to be a part of. And so, again, that's the kind of thing we're seeing churches do, not just the kind of typical weekend service stuff, but then also how do we get our people to get out and actually talk and communicate and connect with others in stuff like that, mass mobilization. It's one of the things we talk about in the book.
So, Rich, the book also then, because I think partly because of what you're discussing, really focuses a lot on how to fix the front door of the church and not
Yep.
necessarily close the back door. Are you
Yep.
suggesting that closing the back door is not important for healthy, thriving churches?
That's a good question, Tony. I think that is can be a criticism, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but that can be a criticism of fast-growing churches that are really just all about the front door. They're all about let's do something bigger, and I've felt that same tension for myself when I've led in churches. You get that feeling of like I don't really want to run a circus. I didn't get in this thing to what's the bigger and better, the greatest showman kind of thing we can do. We didn't really get into this. What we got into this to do is to see people's lives change. And so we do need to focus on how we're getting people to stick and stay. And a part of what I actually talk about in the book is how a lot of churches, the churches that are growing, are worried not only on the front door, but also on the back door. They're working hard to close the back door and ultimately actually apply a lot of, time, effort, energy. So actually one of the tensions, just let you in, be completely honest, Tony, as I was writing this book, originally my idea was to really focus completely on the front door stuff. But then I realized as I was listening to and researching that it would be not only inappropriate, but that's not even actually how church leaders in these churches would think. They would say, we really have to do both. So actually one of the spokes of the wheel is all about kind of the internal communication. These churches, what I found is the way they talk to themselves, for lack of a better word, the way they communicate with themselves, the way they move people along, the way they move new here folks, to get plugged into groups, get plugged into teams, is really robust. And we kind of hint towards that, although there's not, it's not robustly covered in the book. It kind of gives some what I think are table stakes. Actually, even just earlier today, I was talking with a church leader around we were talking about some stuff at his church, and we're talking about kind of basic table stake stuff. So I think we all have to be doing to ensure that we're not just seeing people come in through the front door, but actually getting them plugged in as well. Great question.
Yeah, I will say though, what we find churches that are stuck more oftentimes than not are stuck because of the front door, not the back door. And so, so that's one of the reasons why I'm very intrigued by your book and that focus on especially creating opportunities for people to invite their friends, because that's commonly where we see the most connection to the church in those early steps that people are taking as well. All right, so talk to church leaders, some practical takeaways, some things that they can be applying to really make a difference in their communities, Rich.
All right, so there's a number of things. First of all, I think the big thing is actually taking a step back from that question and saying the most important thing about this book is that you actually apply something. I think we all have been guilty of, we read a book and those are like some interesting ideas. We put it on a shelf and we don't pick it up and apply it. So actually, it's funny. I think in the book world, sometimes the idea of writing a practical book is almost like people look down their nose at that. Where actually, what I've tried to do here is make it very simple. Like literally take this and do it. And so my encouragement to people would be to take one of the 5 systems and actually just start with one of those and say, let's work on that. Let's spend a month, 2 months just plugging away at that. And so like we're coming up to, I'm not exactly sure when this will release, but we're coming up to Easter. This is a great opportunity for so many of our churches. And this was one of those areas. I used to be a leader. And for years, I actually said this publicly. I would be like, every day of the year is as important as any other day of the year. There are no Sundays that are more important. I want guests to come every week. And although that is true, I do want guests to come every week. There are certain days of the year that 2 things happen. One, or your people are more likely to invite their friends, which Easter is one of those days. And then 2, their friends are more likely to attend. So what we need to do as church leaders is double down on those days and make sure that we're making a day that those 2 things are able to happen, that your people are willing to actually invite their friends, and that when their friends show up, that it's a great experience. Because you and I know only somewhere around 2% of people will actually invite someone to come to their church this year. We want to make it a great experience when they do that. And so, I would say a really practical next step, is what, even in these weeks leading up to Easter, what can we do to get your people to invite their friends? And then how do we make sure that we put our best foot forward on that day to ensure that those friends not only have a great experience, but then are more likely to return? I would say that's kind of a great place to start when we think about, what should you be applying from the book.
Rich, you mentioned the 5 systems. Can you give us a quick overview of what those are all about?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I was on, Tony, I was on the Carey Nieuwhof podcast. And so he asked the same question. And I rattled through 4 of them and I was like, well, that's all of them. And didn't get to all 5, which is great. That's great, but I've had no one point it out yet.
So I think what you're going to get content on the Tony Morgan podcast.
Oh, you better believe
don't
it.
Get from Carey Nieuwhof. This is awesome.
All of these questions here, these are, people haven't asked me these questions, which is great. So I appreciate it. So first one, big days. We talked about that. Big days are a big deal, huge opportunity. Two things happen. I actually say two magic things happen. Hopefully people can understand they're not actually magic. People are more likely to invite their friends. Their friends are more likely to attend. The second is series promotion. Every time we start a new series, what I say here is, it's like what you watch on Netflix. You're not really concerned what you're watching now. You're thinking about what you're watching next. And so what people are interested in, what's coming up next at your church, and too many churches just roll from one thing to the next, and they don't mark every series. They don't take time to say, okay, what are we doing, to ensure that we promote this series kind of one step to the next. So that's the second one. The third one is social media. It's interesting, and I know you and I have seen this. I've been in ministry for almost 20 years and, been a part of multi-site and launched a lot of campuses and, it's amazing to me how much social media is changing the way we connect with people. I know that's like, for everyone who watches this, they know that, but I originally was just going to be kind of a footnote, but I made a whole kind of system around that because it's massively important. And particularly what we're sharing online. Just about a month ago, Facebook again articulated what they've been saying really for years, which is that, hey, you can't just post for us in church world. You can't just post a thing that says come to church on Sunday. They're not going to promote that. What you've got to do is make content that your people are going to share. And so we talk through, how do we make great content that your folks are going to share? We talk about what's the difference between remarkable content and helpful content. How do we do that? And some great examples in there. Then the fourth system is what we talk about, mass mobilization. We kind of mentioned that earlier. How do we get people out of their seats and into the streets? And then not only do good in our community, but then leverage those opportunities as a way to really reach more people in your community. And then number 5, what are we doing on the internal communication? How do we get the right message to the right people at the right time? And that's really that aspect around kind of closing the back door. What is kind of table stakes on getting people plugged in? And what we're seeing is all 5 of those, as I look at, the kind of fastest growing churches in the country, churches that are making a difference, they're all doing those things. And it's interesting. The reason why I wrote this book is not because I'm interested in big churches or even fast growing churches and all that, but I am interested in big impact. And I think I know you and I share the same heart. Ironically, it's kind of from the opposite end of the spectrum. It's like, if we can get them unstuck, so then their flywheel will get going, there's like a weird connection between those two ideas. But the reason why is, too many churches across the country are in this stuck position. They're not reaching the communities they're in, and there's people every day that walk by their churches or drive by their churches more likely, and don't know what's going on. And my hope, my heart is that people will read the book, not just read it, but apply it. And then ultimately make an impact, because I really do think the message we have is so critically important. I want to see more people connected with the message of Jesus.
That's true. Good news. It's good. It is good news, and we should be sharing it with more people.
Absolutely.
So, Rich, thanks for joining me today. Again, his book, you can see it again. It's the Church Growth Flywheel, and particularly if you have a sense that it's maybe not the back door, maybe it is the front door that we need to be leaning into. I think you'll find that this is a great resource for your church. Rich, thanks again for joining us today.
Okay, thanks, Tony. I do have a free first chapter of the book, so people don't even have to buy that if they're interested. If you just go to churchgrowthflywheel.com/Tony, so people who love Tony, you go there and you can get that. You download it there. You don't even have to worry about it. You can also find a link to buy it there if you want to, but that's really the place you go. So you can read through it and get the first chapter and says, do I actually like this or not? That's a great place to go to.
Did you give that free chapter to Carrie's listeners too, Rich?
Well, I don't know. You'll have to listen over there.
All right.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks again, Rich.